Hello, welcome. Shouldn't you be doing work? What are you doing watching this? It's a Thursday. It's lunchtime. Oh, it's lunchtime. Oh, perfect then. Here you are. Here I am. Great. Thank you so much for joining me. I think this is going to be something that is, hopefully going to be something that I'm going to be doing on a regular basis. The plan is to be doing these sessions once every week. So ideally Thursdays at around about lunchtime, and just sort of covering really sort of DM prep, just showing you what I do as a DM, how I kind of prep my games. Oh, and by the way, my name's Rob. By the way, I'm the founder of Rolldark. I'm also a professional dungeon master as well. As you can probably tell by my shaky voice, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not too sure why. Probably because I'm being filmed. That's probably why. Anyway, let's crack on with this, shall we? So, okay. So yeah, welcome again. Really looking forward to doing this. It should be a lot of fun. I just kind of want to cover really like how I prep and what it is that I absolutely love about Dungeons and Dragons, and really kind of my sort of ethos and how I work. So in order to kind of give you an idea of this, it's probably best I give you a background. So I discovered Dungeons and Dragons when I was 30, so about 10 years ago. My twin brother actually bought me one of the 3.5 edition boxes, one of the starter boxes, back when I think we were about 16 actually, and it just sat on the shelf for 20 years, just literally collecting dust. And the reason for that was because we just didn't get it. We just didn't have a clue what this game was, how it worked. I mean, we grew up with computer games, playing on our Sega or Nintendo, Atari, Amiga, and obviously board games as well, like Monopoly and so on. And having this game was just like, what is this? Because of course we saw Warhammer in the shops. We saw the little model figures that you could paint. You can play those in like an army and stuff, and that kind of made sense because you could see it. But with this, because it was all imagination, I just couldn't get my head around it. I think that the main thing for me was that because my mind was so blogged with other things, mostly girls, I couldn't really find the time to actually focus on something like Dungeons and Dragons and really kind of get my head around it. So yeah, like I said, it took us a good 20 years. My brother and I then moved to, we both joined the armed forces. He joined the Navy and I joined the Army. So that kind of set us on both completely different paths. And then basically when we moved in together in Richmond in London, we were just basically like bored one night and thought, let's have a crack at that Dungeons and Dragons game that I've got. And yeah, we sat down, we watched YouTube video after YouTube video after YouTube video just to try and get a head around the rules and how you play. And yeah, still absolutely baffled by the game. We were just like, what is this? I think the main thing for us was the idea of having one player be the dungeon master. It was such a bizarre concept that this one player was effectively not really playing the game. Although, of course, they were playing the game. From an outsider's perspective who's never played before, it seemed like such an odd thing to do, that you set up the world, that you're effectively the storyteller. So after a while, we carried on watching some videos and we did a bit of practicing, and then all of a sudden it just clicked. We just suddenly realised what an incredible game this was, and how you get so much from it. And literally, it's just pure creativity in its like greatest forms, and we obviously loved that about it. So we went from being sort of complete like, what is this, to all of a sudden me and him both having our own campaigns all across London with various different groups of friends, people that we sort of met through like meetup groups and so on, and yeah, just absolutely falling in love with it. I think the reason I love it so much is because I'm actually a writer myself, and I've written 2 novels, both of which are steampunk, which is a little bit different to obviously fantasy, still kind of the same sort of realms. I suppose you could compare it to Eberron, because obviously the airships and stuff. But yeah, I think really story structure and the whole idea of how stories work is something that is really sort of like really meant a lot to me, and it really kind of speaks to me. It sings to me in a way. The reason for this is because when I was younger, when I was about 11 years old, I had, I have dyslexia. And when I was 11, I couldn't read at all. I literally couldn't. I would literally read off memory. I still kind of do in a way. Certain words I have to literally just remember them to know what they say, because I cannot break down words at all, and I'm forever making horrendous spelling mistakes. I mean, hopefully you guys will realise through this that one thing you'll take away from it is how many different kind of ways there are to spell simple words when you're sort of, you know, when you're dyslexic. But yeah, so it's so yeah, basically going back to when I was 11. So yes, when I was young, I loved Superman so much, as you can probably tell over here. Here he is. That's Christopher Reeve sat down reading a book. So which I think is quite poignant to really who I am and my story. So I absolutely love Superman. I always have. He's my favourite character in the whole world. The reason probably is because of the duality between Clark and Superman, and how, you know, I think if you've ever seen Kill Bill, Bill sort of like really kind of sums it up, like how he, you know, he like his disguise is actually Clark Kent, because he's actually basically taken on the role of how he kind of sees humanity and who he is and all this kind of business. Whereas I think with Clark Kent as Superman, I kind of grew up, I was always quite nervous. I was always very kind of like shy and whatnot, probably because of my dyslexia being the main thing. And yeah, I just kind of thought that Clark Kent really sort of sung to me, but I knew that there was somebody else inside, someone, obviously not being too egotistical, like Superman, who I just felt there was more that I could give to the world. And I was so in love with the Superman films that I was constantly waiting for a new one to come out. And obviously there was this talk of the Tim Burton Superman, which I think had Nicolas Cage playing Superman, which I was like totally psyched for, really psyched for it. Could never, like, you know, I was like, just literally with like checking any kind of available materials back then. Obviously there was no internet, to see when this film was coming out. And yeah, just delay after delay after delay, and eventually got cancelled. So I was gutted. And I remember one day I was in my local garage, literally because like our nearest shop was a garage from where I lived, and I was sort of looking through like they had like a little tiny book section, and behind this book was The Death and Life of Superman, a novel by a guy called Roger Stern. And I was like, what on earth is this? And I read the back of it, and I was like, my goodness, this sounds like so incredible. Like, this is something that I have literally like waited for my whole life, but how typical that it's in a book, and even more typical, it's a novel. Now, of course, I know that a lot of you will be saying, well, why didn't you read the comic books? Well, growing up in Plymouth and Devon, there were a dime a dozen American DC comic books. You might go to a shop and you might see like maybe issue 256 next to the next issue that they have available, issue number 647. So yeah, they were never around. So this book was. So I went and bought it with my pocket money. And it took me about, I would say, probably 3 years to read. So it was, I would say, probably an average sort of novel size, about 75,000 words, something along those lines. And yeah, but in those 3 years, I learnt my way. I learnt how to read. And from that book, I really got into story structure. I really got into how things work. So I was constantly going over one chapter, back over again. I had a little notebook which I'd write down little notes and be like, okay, so what have I learnt here? I've learnt these words, and also this story is like, you know, there seems to be constant conflict in every single scene. Why is that? And so yeah, so in a way I kind of built up my love for stories and built up my love for writing them myself. And yeah, I mean, I think with Dungeons and Dragons, or any role-playing game for that matter, the creativity that you have there is just superb. So yeah, so let's get started with this. So I think with regards to my prep and how I like to prep, I do use D&D Beyond. I think that it's probably the best one out there, and obviously, of course, as you can see, it's recently been bought by Wizards of the Coast, which, you know, no one saw that coming, of course. But that's great. So I think that they'll probably do something really good with it, and hopefully push it in more of a sort of direction where, I mean, we can only hope, can't we? Where you've got the digital books and the actual published titles. If you buy a published title, maybe they'll have like a code there that you can redeem for some money off the digital product. Who knows? I'm just having some coffee. 1 second. Lovely. Recently bought a coffee machine, and it's you basically sort of like the proper like barista one with a turny thing. I haven't nailed it yet, but I'm getting there. I'm having one a day, and yeah, I'm pretty buzzing at the moment because I've literally drank half of it prior to this, so probably not a good idea. But we'll see. Anyway, back to this. So yeah, so I use D&D Beyond. If you're not used to it, if you haven't used it yourself, it's one of the best things in the whole sort of like way of sort of planning out your games. I see that one of our DM's faces just asked me if I've ever considered using Foundry at all. I have, and I've only ever used it with Star Trek. So I used when I did my Star Trek campaign, I used Star Trek Adventures. I did that, and that was good. Yeah, right. That was good fun. Star Trek is a whole other different system. It's a great system. It's really interesting when you have like the 2d20 dice system. But yeah, it's cool. But I think that with D&D, I've not actually run any online D&D games yet. I think the main reason for the online I have not done it is because I don't know Foundry well enough, and I don't know Roll20 that well enough to really sort of do it from a professional standpoint with regards to the maps and stuff. So hopefully, what I'd like to do actually is, once we've got this up and running, we've got going with the prepping, and we've writing down all the bits and bobs we need to do with this, maybe transfer this onto Foundry, which would be quite a good way of looking at it. So yeah, so going back to D&D Beyond. So with this, I build all my campaigns in there. So I'll just show you. So you have a collections here where you've got your campaigns, your characters, where you create all your characters. So if you're a dungeon master and you've got several different groups that you play with, you can create a whole catalogue of characters. So if you're ever dealing with any complete beginners, you can literally be like, here you go, here's a load of characters, pick whichever one you like, and just give them a choice. You can also obviously narrow that down per campaign, so you can have them on each individual campaign and go, look, these are the characters choices that you have. I think with characters, as a dungeon master, a lot of the time, certainly from my experience, is that dungeon masters will let their players decide what their characters' backstories are going to be. Now, this is great, although it can also be quite impossible to kind of build everyone's backstory into a campaign without the campaign lasting years upon years. So what I often try to do with my players is I ask them to build a backstory based around the parameters of the campaign itself, so that everyone has some kind of vetted interest in the actual campaign from the get-go. The reason I do that is because when you're playing with certain players, in order to get their investment in the actual campaign, they need to feel like they're a part of it, and they need to feel like they have some kind of emotional reason for behaving the way that they are. So for example, everyone's playing a hero, of course, unless of course you've got a completely evil party and you're twisted and want to do some kind of weird stuff. But the majority of games, everyone's a hero. And with that, a hero needs to feel compelled to do what they do. They can't just be, I'm just righteous for the sake of being righteous, because that's boring. In storytelling, that is a boring concept. You look at any kind of superhero that exists, right? Batman is a great example of this. His parents murdered by the mob, the city that his dad was a philanthropist for, but he was trying to build up and trying to get rid of crime, is falling apart. He's got all this money and all this power, Bruce Wayne, and what does he decide to do with it? He decides to go against the grain and become a vigilante and try and stop it all and try and clean up the streets, because the police are corrupt, the politicians are corrupt. So he feels the emotive pull of his heroism. He feels that, like, I have to do something because of how I feel and how I love, and my experiences with my parents, who I also loved. So a great way of kind of I suppose in a way sort of setting that all up was the original Batman film, it wasn't The Dark Knight, was it? It was Batman Begins, and that was really great, because it really sort of gave you the, oh right, I get him now. I get like why Bruce Wayne's doing this. This is awesome, and you really feel like you're really rooting for him, because he's living through like just the past and his father and the influence of the, it's just brilliant. So yeah, as you can tell, I get a bit passionate about stuff like that. So moving on. So campaigns. Here's a big list of all my campaigns here that I've currently got on. Big list. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's go with create a new campaign. So obviously before we start, we need inspiration. So it's all very well and good just going to create a campaign and being like, yeah, I'm going to create a D&D campaign. Here we go. Set in blah, blah, blah. Saw Coast. Yep. These are the gods. This is it. And everyone starts in a tavern. That's lazy, okay? Because what you want to do, you don't want to over prep, because when you over prep, you can't factor in the element of the fact. You can't factor in the element of the fact that your players will ultimately build this story for you based on their decisions. And I think that I'm all for the whole idea that you prep as you go along. So after each session, you then prep based on the decisions that your players made in order to really make them feel like they are not being railroaded. So railroading, for example, if you've never heard of this before, is when you basically just stick them on that track. So when they get to this point, this is going to happen whether they like it or not, and at this point, this is going to happen whether you like it or not. And you're going to take a left, and there's a tree, and there's a rock. And you carry on, and there's a thing, and there's this. It's just boring, right? You want them to really feel like they are making the decisions and they are driving the story forward. So this is all great, having a white piece of paper in front of you effectively, and you'll hear a lot of writers and a lot of creative types being like, yeah, you just start with a white sheet of paper in front of you and that's how you begin. That's great, but you really got to draw from the inspiration that you have from your life. So best place to start, things you love, and things that you've seen recently that may very well have inspired you in order to create an interesting and compelling story. So, for example, I recently watched an episode of Vikings where the Viking, Ragnar, what was his name? Ragnar, him and his mates all went down to Paris, which I believe was, well, it's Francia back then, and they tried to invade the Paris city. Now, if you've seen this episode or you know anything about history, the Frankian city of Paris, or what it was now called now, was basically a huge fort, fortified, like massive, great big city, very similar to Troy, which actually is quite interesting because I wonder if Paris is actually called after Paris from the Iliad, the story of which is Troy is based in. That could very well be the case. Interesting. Anyway, funny enough, they have two very similar sort of elements to them. So they're impenetrable fortresses, fortified cities. So I quite like the idea of a fortified city of some sort being attacked, or an attack being imminent, and the city preparing for that attack. So something else that I watched recently as well, which I thought was quite good and a brilliant story, was Don't Look Up on Netflix, and how everyone was like, they were so ignorant of the fact that an asteroid was going to come and destroy humanity. Like they're just like, oh yeah, it's not going to happen, no, we're fine, like the whole ivory tower kind of concept. So I really like those two concepts. So the ivory tower concept, like we're fine, nothing's going to happen, the ignorance of being bliss or whatnot, and then ignorance is bliss, sorry. And then also the attack of a fortified, massive sort of like structure that is pretty much, you are like the odds against like any kind of siege, like sieges throughout time are, I mean, especially when we're looking at the moment in the news, if you siege any people, it's a very tough thing to do. To take over a city or a town, whatever, it's incredibly difficult, because for a start you've got a militia of the people that live there that don't want to be invaded, so they're going to rise arms and fight against the oppressors. So yeah, so it's very cool in that respect. So I would say that if you've got so looking at the whole idea here, so you've got the idea of Troy, you've got the idea of Paris, Francia, and you've also got the ignorance of the people that lived there that didn't believe that they were going to be attacked. So from that, you've got two schools of thought. You've got the oppressors and the oppressed, but you've also got the ones who are ignorant, who I guess would fall into the oppressed, I suppose, in this sense, because that would be quite interesting. Because if they're going to attack and they're like, oh no, that's still what are all these men doing in the horizon here with like they've all got fire, and there's like a big battering ram over there, and there's like a catapult over here, and there's a what's that? Looks like a blimey, I don't like the look of that. What's going on? I mean, are we being attacked? Are we about to get attacked? And then some city person's like, no, we're not going to get attacked. That's just a training exercise, or that's just the people from the neighbours who are just coming to say hello, or something like that. That kind of thing. So in order to get to that stage, I think it would be good to have some kind of political play within the story. So I'm going to write this down, so just so I've got an idea. So here we go. So political... This is when you get to see how dreadful my spelling is. definitely wrong. Grammarly's doing its work. You can see it just kind of spinning there, thinking, what on earth are you trying to say? There we go. How did I get that wrong? Political. There we go. Political play between two factions. I'll just spell check it in a minute. Between two factions that are not at war with each other, but need a reason to be. So this is interesting, isn't it? Because when you think about Troy, you think about the reasons as to why Troy was invaded. Now, obviously, Troy was considered to be an impenetrable fortress. So, what would it take for a king to decide to raise an army in order to take over Troy? AKA his wife. AKA his wife, Helen of Troy, gets kidnapped by Paris and taken to Troy, so that they would. So basically, they just kidnapped her because he was in love with her, Paris. And the king of Greece was like, obviously incredibly mortified by this and hated the fact that had happened. So he raised an army, hired Achilles, and off they went to Troy to invade them, to basically get back his wife. And they launched. Was it the face that launched 1,000 ships? So that's the reason for the attack. So this is quite an interesting part here, because we need to think of the reason. So let's imagine the players, the characters, they're caught up in some kind of political play somehow. Maybe they're Senate members of a neighbouring state, and something's happened with this other fortification. So let's type down players. So I'm just taking notes at the moment. Players are Senate members of the future attacking state. Okay, so the players are Senate members of future attacking state. Maybe. It doesn't necessarily have to be. We could also go down the route of another angle here as well. So again, with this, you really sort of need to understand your players and what kind of game they want, because if you're saying to them, you're all members of the Senate of this neighbouring town, they might be a bit put off by that, because it could be a little bit like what's the word I'm looking for? Intimidating for some people. Some players might not want to have anything to do with politics in their games. They don't want to have, even to the level of being Senate members and not even actually doing any kind of politics. But the idea of that could be against them. So always talk to them first. Always talk to your players if you can talk to them first, and just kind of do a temperature check to see what kind of game they want to do, or how they want to be involved in a story of this nature. So it could very well be that they don't want to be part of the attacking state. They want to be part of the state that actually are being invaded. So again, it's kind of, I mean, obviously if you say that they're part of the state that's being invaded, then you kind of give the game away of the story. So I think it kind of rests better that they are probably on the attacking side, because if they're in the other state, then they're just sort of waiting around for something to happen, which isn't really good story structure. So so let's look at it this way. So players are Senate members of the future attacking state. Cool. Let's imagine that the players, they're up for that and they think that's a good idea. Cool. So political play between two factions that are not at war with each other but need a reason. Okay, players are Senate members of the future attacking state. So the reason. Let's think, what could we do for the reason? Why would you want to attack a highly fortified city? So the obvious choice is my mind is just going straight to Troy again, and Helen being kidnapped. Family members being kidnapped. I suppose what you could do here, rather than have it so that you've just got two, like what appears to be two equal footing states, maybe have one state that's being oppressed by the other a little bit more. So in fact, actually, maybe have the ones that eventually attack this fortification are actually being, their people are being kidnapped in the night, by the people who are in this fortified city. Let's call the fortified city something so we've got a good reference. Let's call it... What kind of name? Gorba? How about... So Francia and Troy. So that's basically what we're based on, isn't it? Francia, Frankioi, Troy, Troya, Troya. That's obvious. How about something else? Oh, right, quick, think of a name. Right, it's going to be Troya for the time being, because otherwise I don't want to be wasting my time here. Troya, there we go, all your time for that matter. So yeah, so players are Senate members of the future attacking state, Troya. Cool. And no, they're not members of that state. That's Troya is the name of the city. Troya is the name of the city. Is the name of the fortified city. Maybe they're actually in the same state. That might be a good idea. And this fortified city is where the elites live, and perhaps they are. Maybe the backstory of this campaign, which is another important thing you have to have, is a backstory for your campaigns, for the stories, so certainly for what's going on. Maybe the backstory is that these guys that came to this state are actually past invaders, and they invaded and they set up camp, and then eventually they built themselves a massive city slap bang in the middle of the state, and that's where all of the generals and the top brass from that previous civilization type group of people, whatever you want to call them, came over and invaded them. So Troy is the name of the fortified city within the occupied state. Troy is the name of the fortified city within the occupied state. Cool. We are definitely going to change the name Troya because obviously that's just too much of a rip-off. Political play between two factions. The reason. Players of Senate members of the future. Okay, so the reason. The everyday folk that surround the city of Troya. The reason the everyday folk that surround the city of Troya want to invade Troya is because the Trojans, as we'll call them for the time being, the Trojans are kidnapping citizens in the night to become slaves in their city. Okay, so is this a cliche? Kidnapping citizens in the night, at night, to become slaves in their city. So I think that is probably a bit of a cliche. Kidnapping citizens in the night to become slaves in the city. If you're hearing it at night, there's going to be a lot of noise. They're probably going to be a bit like, oh no. So another film that I really like, that's probably a bit underrated actually, is Dracula Untold. I really enjoy that story, and I know this is based on Vlad the Impaler, who was a Romanian Romanian lord who Bram Stoker based Dracula on, and he was constantly being invaded. His lands were constantly being invaded by the Turks, and in order to scare them off, to stop them from invading him, he built this whole kind of like mythos around himself, that he was this like evil dragon type figure, and he used to, with all the people that would come and invade him, he used to impale them and have them on spikes. So literally you actually go towards his castle. You've probably seen what's the vampire, there's a vampire anime on Netflix, Castlevania. There we go, Castlevania. So yeah, so you've seen that. That's pretty much actually what happened. Obviously, the castle wasn't on mechanics, couldn't move through through Transylvania, but yeah, you get the idea. So yeah, so where we get to. So Trojans kidnapping citizens in the night, become slaves in their own city. Okay, cool. So the reason I was making this direct reference to the Dracula Untold was because every year the Lord would have to, the Turks would come in because at this point they were like in control of the area, and they would effectively come in and take children. So they take young boys that had come of age to come and join the Turk army and fight on behalf of the Turk army. So something like that could be quite cool. So where there's a rule, there's a certain law that these citizens have to abide by, and maybe the oppressors are so nasty that if they don't do that law, they'll literally come down and slaughter everybody. And maybe before in the backstory, the people that live in this state are pacifists as well, and maybe they have sent out some kind of message to the greater sort of lands to recruit some people to come to help them to retrieve some people from their city. Or maybe there's some kind of fallen general or something that is seeking their help because he needs to raise an army in order to take on the people of Troya. So there's that element to it, which could be quite cool. But there's also, in a way, what you could do is this is when the players' decisions sort of come in, because the players can effectively decide what they want to do. So they might not necessarily want to raise an army to invade Troy. They might want to go about it in a very sort of espionage type way and go into the city and cause a coup. They might even want to do all sorts of different things. Like there's a whole wealth of options here, and you can, I guess in a way, you can kind of leave it to the players to decide based on the number of NPCs you have that they encounter in the story. That will be more like each NPC will have an agenda. So each NPC will have an agenda based on how they want the story to play out. So effectively, you can have one NPC who's an ex-general. His agenda or her agenda is that they want to raise an army to go and attack Troy, right? You could also have another person's agenda. So you could have someone who perhaps lives is part of the Thieves Guild, and they perhaps want to send in spies in order to cause a coup, and that's part of their agenda. Discovering what their agenda is something that you would have to kind of play out with the players and the NPCs, because you don't want to just go up to the NPC and be like, oh, what's your involvement in all of this, and what do you want to do? And they'd be like, oh, I'd like to raise an army to go and take on Troy. That's just not interesting enough, is it? That's just like easy peasy lemon squeezy, here you go, here's your story, boom. And it's not dynamic enough, it's not compelling. So you want to have something that's a bit more compelling. You want the guy to be broken down, beaten down, down on his luck. I would say the kind of person like Obi-Wan Kenobi is at the moment in the new series that's going to be coming out. So he's like, I don't know if you've seen the trailer. Looks pretty good. But he's obviously a classic example. They lost. He lost all of his companions and his comrades are being slaughtered by the Inquisition from the Jedi, and he's in hiding. And his little glimmer of hope that he has is Luke. So that's his only glimmer of hope is Luke. So he's obviously working to try and get Luke of age to then train him to be a Jedi to then go and fight his dad, Darth Vader. Dark stuff. When you think about it, it's pretty dark. But this is what I'm saying. It's like this one NPC could be really sort of downbeat and downtrodden, and it isn't obvious to the players that is that person's agenda. That NPC's agenda isn't obvious. Just that he was a great general, but they find that out either prior to meeting him, or while they're talking to him, and they're kind of like trying to figure out what's going on in this city and what the plan is and how they're gonna sort of sort out these Trojans. So playing that out would be difficult, but interesting, I think. This sort of campaign would rely heavily on players that have got a good grasp of role playing, So I would say you probably would not want to start it with beginners, although this isn't something that you have to do straight away. This could just be that's what's happening in the world at large. So if you look at what would be a good comparison? Sorry to bring it back to Star Wars again, but I think Star Wars is a good analogy here. When you look at like Episode 4 of Star Wars, the first Star Wars film that came out, a film within itself, a story within itself, but obviously part of a bigger thing that was going on. There was an emperor. You know, we didn't even know where the Empire like main planet was. Didn't even get mentioned. Didn't know any of that stuff. Didn't know what the Emperor looked like. You know, there was none of that business. And yeah, Face, always a good example. Absolutely, yeah, it is great. Star Wars story structure is fantastic. The reason for that is because George Lucas studied the book by who wrote it? Who wrote it? Oh, what's it called? Face, do you know what it's called? The story with the hero's journey. I know it's called The Hero's Journey, but I can't remember who wrote it. Anyway, Alistair Campbell, I think. No? Alistair Campbell? Anyway, doesn't matter. But yeah. So, The Hero's Journey, which is about, you know, a hero who is in a community, who aspires for more, meets a mentor. The mentor offers them a chance for adventure, some in one form or another. First of all, the hero refuses. They refuse the option to go and become like greater than what they are. At first, they refuse. They think it's too above them or whatever the reason may be. They then go back to the community. Something really bad happens, which then, from a character arc perspective, makes them feel like they've crossed the boundary of no return. So they've literally gone, okay, so now all hope is lost. And the only way they're going to be able to move forward with this is if they suddenly... Joseph Campbell. Yes, it is Joseph Campbell. Yeah, that's it. I know it's someone Campbell. The only way they're going to turn this around is if they... train of thought. Is if they take up the mantle of the mentor and follow them on the adventure. So they go on to the adventure, they have loads of different trials and things, and they meet someone who's kind of like helpful but kind of not. They're going through their own character arc as well. Eventually they come back and help them when they realise what, you know, actually what's going on is actually, you know, for the greater good, and they themselves are good. And yeah, they learn something new, they get a new skill, they save the day, they come back to the community and share with everyone what they've learned. So that's basically the hero's journey. And that's Star Wars, that's The Matrix, that's so many different... that you could literally see it in so many films. If you watch any film or read any books, you literally will see it everywhere. The call to adventure, refuses it. Something bad happens. Feels compelled to go for the call to adventure now, rather than having an offer, now feels compelled. So that's basically the difference. So what I'm trying to say here is basically we need to get the players to feel compelled to go and sort out the Troyans in however way they wish to go about it. And what we'll do is we'll seed the world with those options in the form of NPCs. So yes, NPCs are plot devices, so they can help move the story forward. But it is ultimately up to the players to discover this fact based on all the NPCs. And of course, they're going to be mixed in with other NPCs who are just there to really kind of enforce and back up the players. So all of this could happen later on if you're starting with beginners. So you don't need to have them be Senate members to begin with. You can have them as simple wanderers who have wandered into town or whatever. They could be as part of a circus act that have come into town, that they're all like, you know, magicians because of the magic that they can perform, or however you want to weave it in. I always try to avoid taverns as being the start of an adventure. I just think it's overdone. It's so cliche. It's great that a lot of people a lot of people will love to be in a tavern, and of course have taverns in your game and have them go there. Because taverns are where you learn rumours, effectively. You learn rumours about what's going on in the world. So have that go on. But to have it from the very start, it's something that... yeah, I know he did. Yeah. But that's out of my control. So yeah, out of my control Face. But it's okay to have taverns. It's great. From a story perspective, from a D&D perspective, it is a cliche. It just is. So if you're dealing with players that have played a long time and they're starting in a tavern, some of them might be a bit like, why are we always starting in a tavern? Like, why? And who's this mysterious stranger that's going to come speak to us and send us on some adventure? Like, why does this always have to be the way? It's a bit of a. I mean, obviously, it's a tool for getting a story up and running and getting to go. But if you really want to kind of be creative and create a story that's yours, that you can say, that's mine, put your own stamp on it, then avoid cliches. Always avoid cliches. Okay, so we've got our players. They're eventually going to become Senate members, and they're going to be somehow or another going to Troya to attack them. How are we going to do that? Okay, so I said they could be out-of-towners, and they come into town, or they could be part of the town, and maybe they've just come of age. So if we're starting off with level 1 characters, this is quite a good thing to do, where they've literally just, they've come into themselves and they've left their various different schools of training. So this is where your kind of influence on the players' backstories will come in. So you want to make sure that the players' backstories have some sort of reason to sort of be there. You want it's got to be, like I said before, they really have to kind of be part of the story. So yeah, backstories. Let's have a think. So we've got a city surrounded by a city, I suppose we could call it. So we've got a fortified city. Fortified city of Troya. So I just deleted that. Of Troya, surrounded by another city. Another city, well, I suppose it would be surrounded by, let's say it's surrounded by hamlets. So pockets of hamlets with a bit of wilderness in between. So you've got like a big fortified city, massive wall around it, and then around that you've got like wilderness, town, hamlet, little village, another little village. And all these villages are interconnected somehow. They all kind of know what's going on with these dudes, and they come down, and it's all part of like the thing. Maybe there's like village elders and town elders. Okay, so fortified city of Troy, surrounded by several towns and villages. Okay, so this is good. We've got a good idea now of sort of a visual idea of where the main setting is. I find it easier to do it this way because it's better to kind of get your sort of your nuts and bolts, as it were, first into your world and your story idea out of you and on paper or on the screen, and then from here you can then start to build your world. The depth of how much you want to build your world is up to you and up to obviously the players that you're playing with, because you don't really want to be doing a massive world that you describe in all these incredible, wonderful things that are in it, and really basically over egging the pudding, because you don't want to have a world that is like sprawling massive if only the game is going to be happening here in this, amongst these villages and towns. You don't want to go too big, is what I'm saying. Of course, you're going to get players who will ask you certain questions, and that's where your improv skills comes in, and you sometimes just have to make it up on the fly. All right, so if there's things you haven't thought about, it's always better to just say whatever comes out your gob, rather than be like, I don't know actually. Well, I mean, there are some gods that look after this world. There's like a Celtic type god, maybe. I don't know. I would be like, just okay. If someone said to me, I hadn't put gods in this. If someone said to me, "Are there any gods?" I'd go, "There are, but the people who live here don't worship any. So you won't find any temples, any churches, nothing. But gods do exist." So straight away, I've just basically made a rod for my own back. So now it means I can't put any temples anywhere, any churches anywhere, and any clerics that are there are like, what? What do you mean there's no paladins? Like, well, hold on a second. How are we gonna? Where am I from? So yeah. So obviously you've got to make sure that what you say is, legit and based in the world that you're basing it in, and makes sense. So yeah. So I would say with gods, up to you if you want to have a single god or a pantheon or whatever you want to do. I would maybe think about if you've got any warlocks, if they've got any sort of like I always like to go towards warlocks really rather than clerics and paladins, because paladins and clerics they're great, but I think their ideas of gods is very sort of like, it's very much our world, isn't it? It's very not monotheist, but you know, what's what I'm looking for? Like when it's kind of like, you know, it's very structured like the Catholic Church. It's very ornate in that respect, and we're very used to seeing that. Whereas I think with warlocks, their gods or their other work, traditional. There you go, traditional. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. I think that's Chris. Pixelbot Brand. Is that Chris? Is this you, Chris? You might say yes. No. Don't know. Anyway, it's yeah, it's very kind of like you've got to. Yes, it is. Great. Hey, Chris. So you have the. I keep breaking off my train of thought. Yeah. So the warlocks. So the otherworldly patron are people that not people that they're effectively like, you can go proper Eldritch with this, and of course, you know, with the Eldritch Blast and Eldritch gods and so on, that's kind of where you're sort of leaning towards. And if you're a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, obviously you know about Cthulhu and all the other sort of you know, the mythos that he created. And I think that's a much more interesting and much more kind of mysterious world to kind of venture into when you have gods. So ultimately, when you look at gods and you look at the past and you look at, obviously, you know, what they were trying to do with gods and the whole idea of it, fear is something that comes into it a lot. You know, the Spanish Inquisition, the Catholic Church, you know, the whole referendum that happened, the Anabaptists in Munster, in northern Germany. That was like a horrendous thing that happened there. If you're not familiar with history, have a look at that. Whew, pretty dark. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and that's fear. That's fear. The ancient religions were founded on fear, and I think with the otherworldly patrons, I mean, you ain't known fear until you've come face to face with some kind of eldritch god. I mean, this is like next level shit. So that's the kind of gods I think we should have in this world, are gods that are feared, but mostly through not understanding them and being massively intimidated by their fear. I think that would be quite cool. So yeah. Face. Or is it? I don't know. Might not be Face. It might not be Chris. Might be somebody else. So yeah, okay, cool. So let's go for this then. So gods that are mysterious and feared greatly. Okay, so this would encourage you to obviously want to include at least one warlock in your game, and have them be the main sort of religious persons. Make sure their religious skill is quite high, because you could very well have it that the god in this world, or gods, play a part of what's going on somehow. Maybe they are like, everyone has a reason for their actions, right? So maybe the reasons the Trojans are kidnapping citizens in the night, I don't know if that's too cliche, or however they're doing it, with slaves for their army or whatever they're doing. Maybe they're sacrificial offerings. Maybe they are something else, perhaps. Maybe they're taking them and they're training them. And maybe there's a twist. Maybe there's a twist to the story. Maybe they're taking the most hardy people from the villages and towns and training them to maybe that'd be quite a cool. That might be quite a good idea. So I've just had a thought. Maybe what we could do is, the Trojans are actually a great big group of warlocks, right? And they are taking citizens from these villages and towns because they happen to be on some sort of like power, sort of like earthly power that's underneath the city or underneath the area that they live. And this power is being sucked into, like, the magical energy is being sucked into some of the citizens. Only a few of them are getting like this overwhelming, burning sort of strength. And those people are warlocks, and they're becoming like warlocks, and they're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. And obviously when that happens, the Trojans send in their elite to go and take those people and take them back up to their city, where they're training them to go and fight this, go to this other realm where this other god is, to basically do battle with that god and that god's minions. Because what's also happening in Troya is that the people are getting killed, or something bad's happening. Just as an idea, yeah. So gods that are mysterious are feared greatly. Yep, cool. And all of the citizens in the city of Troya. Have I spelled that same? Troy are warlocks. And Troya is a school / training ground for warlocks that are going to become protectors, warriors who will fight against an overly zealous eldritch god that is what could they be doing to these people in Troya? Are they being nasty and horrible, or are they trying to, like, what are they trying to do? What's the motivations of this eldritch god? Because obviously the motivations of the Trojans are to kidnap the citizens at night, and from what the people believe, are slaves. Obviously twisting the story, they're not slaves, they're actually being trained to become warlocks to fight against this eldritch god, because these people that are being taken have special warlock abilities. Kind of like Jedi, that kind of thing, right? So yeah, always steal from, what already exists. So yeah, so they're being taken to be trained to become warlocks, and they're going to become some warriors who will fight against the overly zealous eldritch god. That is what the obvious would be, that the eldritch god is coming to this plane of reality because they want to take it over, or maybe the eldritch god is on its way, and some great warlock lives in Troya who has foretold this, knows that this zealous eldritch god is on its way, and it's going to basically destroy the whole of reality as they know it. Okay, so reality is at risk. So the biggest thing that could ever be at risk is reality itself. Let's be honest. So okay, so the eldritch god that is going to destroy our reality. Cool. Okay, great. So that's the basic framework. Now, having this all down and written is useful. Obviously, you want to read it back and make sure it makes sense, so that when you do come back to this later, when you've gone and life's gotten in the way, you want to make sure that everything you've written does kind of you do think you do know what it says. So political play between two factions that are not at war with each other but need a reason. Players are Senate members of the future attacking state. Okay, so Troya is the name of the fortified city within the occupied state. The reason the everyday folk that surround the city of Troya want to invade Troya is that the Trojans are kidnapping citizens in the night. What at the night for? In the night to become slaves in their city, or so they think. Or so they think. The fortified city of Troya is surrounded by several towns and villages. Cool, great. So the fortified city of Troy is surrounded by several towns and villages. Okay, made up of simple made up of simple made up of simple systems of communal. That's definitely not how you spell communal. Communal. Alright, communal. Government. So like town elders, etc. Cool. So, a fortified city of Troy, surrounded by several towns and villages, made up of simple systems of communal government, town elders, etc. Gods that are mysterious and feared greatly. Okay, yep. So we've got that. So all of the citizens of the city of Troy are warlocks. Let's just delete this because that was part of the thinking process. We don't need to have that anymore. All of the citizens in the city of Troy are warlocks, and Troy is a school/training ground for warlocks that are going to become warriors who will fight against an overly zealous eldritch god that is going to destroy our reality. The townfolk that surround Troy have no idea and think that Troy are the oppressors. Oppressors? Oppressors. There you go. Great. So if all of the citizens in the city of Troy are warlocks and Troy's townsfolk and surround Troy have no idea if Troy are the oppressors. Sweet. And that includes the players. So the players also have no idea that that's what's going on. The players also have no idea that there is a bigger stake to be had in the grand scale of the story. However, they will discover this as the story unfolds. Bosh. There we go. Cool. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's a pretty cool sort of story idea going on there. Again, like I said, you need to get the players invested into this story. So have them meet NPCs that are taken in the night. So a good thing to do in that case would be if you've got, so obviously you want to have, so in a story you need to have conflict on pretty much, if you're writing a novel, conflict has to occur in every chapter of some sort, and there has to be some kind of resolve to the conflict. Doesn't always have to be a positive resolution, it can sometimes be a negative resolution, but the resolution has to take place and it has to move the story forward in a forward direction. Doesn't matter whether it's down or up, it has to go forwards. So diagonally down or diagonally up towards the eventual whatever's going to happen at the moment. Halfway through a story, you get to the point of no return, which is where all hope is lost. So that's normally where you think that, oh no, we've got nothing to do, we're doomed. We've got no one to pilot the ship to take us to drop the bombs into the Death Star. Who can do it? We've got that's like the point of no return. That's the all hope is lost bit. So Return of the Jedi, the Emperor stood on his platform being like, your friends have failed. That kind of shit. So yeah. So the players have no idea what's going on until the living state. Story. Sweet. So yeah. So from here, we now need to think about how we're gonna start the story and how we're gonna get these players into the story. So what I'll do is I'm gonna type this up so it makes a bit more sense. And then how long have we been streaming? We're going for about an hour and a couple minutes. Cool. So we'll leave it there for today. And then next week, what I'll do is I'll pick up from where we've kind of left off. We'll obviously do a brief sort of summary of where we are with regards to the story, and then we'll start creating characters and how they're going to be sort of like influenced into the story itself with their backstories and so on. So yeah, thank you so much for this. Can I play in this campaign? Face. Of course you can. Although now you know the twist in the story. Funny. Yeah, I mean, in time, I think that once we've got it together and we've built the campaign, definitely, I think it could be something that we could do through Rolldark. Absolutely, why not? Why not indeed? But anyway, thanks so much for joining me today. Sorry about the nerves and sorry about all the and all the spelling mistakes and everything else. But yeah, it was great to have you here, and be sure to tune in to Chris tomorrow. I believe it is Chris. You're doing your Baldur's Gate 3. Are you doing it tomorrow? Are you still there, Chris? You might have gone. And then, of course, you've got Edge of Chaos, which won't be on Sunday because it is Easter, of course. And then I think yes, he is. So Chris is going to be doing Baldur's Gate. He's going to be switching from here tomorrow. About 7, is it? Yeah, with Nanook the Barbarian. Pretty cool. And then you'll be joining Face and the Gang, Edge of Chaos, not this Sunday, but next Sunday, I think it is. For the I think this is the conclusion of the second part of the campaign, isn't it? I believe so. Anyway, thanks again, and yeah, we shall catch up soon. All the best.